let's get over to our keynote. And we've got a really special guest here to kick things off for us for the first DevOps Days in Tampa. He's been helping teams develop software and improve their operations since before DevOps was even a word. He is one of the members of the National Organizing Committee and a thought leader overall within the DevOps place. Please join me in welcoming Andrew Clay Shafer.
Good morning, Tampa Bay. I prefer thought bleeder myself, but let's take a quick picture. Everyone smile for your camera. There we go. Eventually I'll have some slides. How's everyone doing? Ready to dev some ops? All right. Has anyone ever seen me speak before? Yeah? So this is a little remix with some new sauce, so I hope you enjoy it. So omakase, does anyone know what that word means? So what is DevOps and why should you care? Why do you care? Does anyone care? You made it here. All right, so this is a word from my sponsor. So I work for a company called Pivotal. Pivotal's mission is to transform how the world builds software. Moving on from that, I have a personal mission, and I think we're doing okay. Could do better, but I'm trying to transform how the world operates software. So let's talk about me. It's all about me. So I did some stuff before. As was mentioned, I'm part of an international core group that organizes all the DevOps days. Also been associated with some other conferences and some open source projects, and I don't know. Has anyone ever configured a computer with any of these logos? Yeah? Make some computers do some things? I don't really like tools, but we need them. This is also important. This is my Twitter handle, critical. And then this is my personal logo that I made for myself, just to let you know what kind of narcissist you're dealing with. And then also important, I come in various configurations of hair and beard. So if you see me in the wild, I might look very different. Don't be afraid. It's the same monster. All right, so this is very critical. This is important. I put this in almost every talk I've given for the last couple of years. Most important stuff. Learn to read, learn to write, learn to speak, and then tweet this talk. Very critical. But I'm actually serious, because the communication, which is something I'm going to come back to over and over, is the most important part of enabling us to work together, right? We have assumptions about how the world works in our mind, and if we don't express them with other people, then their assumptions don't match ours, their incentives don't match ours, and you're going to have problems. And this is the key to doing it. Reading, writing, speaking. Right? Chop wood, carry water. All right, so too long, didn't read. Improving ops is the best way to improve dev. Turns out also improving dev is a pretty good way to improve ops. And then one of the things I've been really thinking about lately is sort of like the old masters or the old writings on system thinking, reading Akoff and Senge and some of this other stuff. And in our kind of Western analytical minds, we like to have these clean categories for things, but we don't have very good language for talking about the relationships and the connections, right? So we're talking about dev and ops, but really what we want to do is make better connections. It's the empty space between those two things that changes everything. And then just to be fully buzzword compliant, you're going to continuously DevOps microserverless or lose to someone who is. Like that's 2019. That's where we live, for better or worse. All right, I invented DevOps. Right? This is embarrassing. I didn't invent DevOps. I stole it. And I stole it from my friends because good DevOps copy, but great DevOps steal. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this. I already sort of showed some of the projects I was involved with, but I got a very privileged vantage point to watch the last decade of IT infrastructure evolve and be built. And you know, bless all these projects and all these people, but I didn't invent anything. I just saw what worked. I just copied people that were getting good results and like tried to distill the generalities. And then I was in a very privileged position to talk about them in a way that resonated with people, right? And hopefully some of the stuff I say today resonates with you. So there's no root cause. This is a very, very common thing people are saying. So one of the people who's most fond of saying that is John Allspaw. And this is a slide, a sampling of slides from a deck that John Allspaw and Paul Hammond did at Velocity in 2009. And this is like pretty much in some ways, I think, the beginning of the conversation. So dev and ops, it's not actually a word yet. DevOps is not coined as a word, but this is the slides, and you guys lived this before, right? You've seen this, and this is 10 deploys a day at the time, 2009, like people was just like, their heads were exploding. Right now people are, you know, Amazon's on record deploying more than once every second, right? That's the world we live in now. So I was sitting in the audience at this Velocity talk, and I tweeted this. Don't just say no, you aren't respecting other people's problems. VelocityConf DevOps working together. Because like it seemed like a good idea at the time to like just put a bunch of hashtags on stuff. And they were talking about Dev and Ops, and I tweeted a bunch more, and I tagged them similarly. And then I was already working on organizing a conference with this fine gentleman. He's actually awesome. I don't know, has anyone ever seen Patrick or talked to Patrick? So Patrick, watching me tweet and having VelocityConf FOMO from Belgium, decided immediately to call the sysadmin, we were calling it Agile Infrastructure, that we're gonna have DevOps Days. It's gonna be called DevOps Days. This is the very first DevOps Days is in Ghent, and the 10-year anniversary is this year. So in October, in Ghent, 10-year anniversary, 10 years of DevOps Days, basically. But all these things didn't come from me or Patrick, right? Like these are ideas. So this is 2006, 3 years before the first DevOps Days. And I'll just read it. Actually, I can go over here and read it. The traditional model is that you take your software to the wall that separates development and operations, and you throw it over and then forget about it. Not at Amazon. You build it, you run it. This brings developers into contact with the day-to-day operation of their software. It also brings them into day-to-day contact with the customer. This customer feedback loop is essential for improving the quality of the service. So this is 2006, 3 years before anyone saying DevOps. Werner Vogels, the CTO of Amazon, saying things that sound suspiciously like DevOps, right? This is the same, and so what I'm going to argue, and what I do argue, is that like these are the cloud natives, and they adopted these practices. They developed these practices as a Darwinian function of their survival and to deliver at the scale and the speed and the quality that they needed to. Like you couldn't have built Google and Amazon with ITIL. Like you just couldn't. This is from 2007. So this is a blog post that was on O'Reilly Radar in 2007 from Jesse Robbins. He's a founder of Chef, but he also, at the time, worked at Amazon. So there's like an Amazon influence. And he's arguing in this blog post, and this is over 10 years old now, so we could dissect it a million different ways, and I have. But basically that there's this traditional way people do operations, and what you should see from the color under the graph, that represents the number of hours worked to scale an infrastructure, right? So like as you scale the infrastructure, you have to do this much more work. And then like this new operation secret sauce way is maybe there's like a bigger upfront investment in certain types of things, but then as you scale the infrastructure, there's less and less toil. There's less and less work for the humans to do, right? And this is 2007, so the tools that we have in 2019 are way better than what you can do in 2007. Then this is everyone's probably lived this. So you have the wall of confusion between developers and operators. I actually used this slide in 2008, basically same slide. And the only way you communicate between these two personas is with a ticket system, right? Like, you don't even see each other as humans. It's just like tickets come in, you respond to tickets, and that makes people unhappy. Or maybe you've seen this movie, Worse Than Unhappy. Does anyone work there? Yeah. So these are just the opposing forces, because we set up incentives in our organizations where developers' incentives are basically to change things, which is going to destabilize them, and operations is incentivized to stabilize them, and that doesn't seem like it's aligned, right? So unless you're connecting to a higher reason for why the org does things, then you get these conflicts. This is just how it is. Also, 2009, this book came out. I wrote a chapter. Patrick wrote a chapter. John Allspot and Jesse Robbins also wrote in this book. It's a great book. It's been 10 years, but I still think it's one of the best books on some of these topics. Some of the tooling stuff's a little dated, but some of the principles are going to be timeless. So just to frame it, where DevOps came from, I'm going to call everything before 2006 BC, before cloud, and then there's like this space in between. We're not sure what happened, but after 2009 is after DevOps. So it's like, that's the magic time, 3 years. Things happen. Okay, but what is DevOps? Well, it's this. Right? So you read these blog posts, or you see these like little startups talking about their tool or like their process, and it all sounds so great, right? And I'll come back to how like it's not always so great. But this is what it sounds like when some people talk about it. And I'm going to use this slide over and over. So this is what DevOps is: pandas vomiting rainbows. But in 2010, there's a group of us that wrote blog posts, and the blog posts I wrote, what DevOps meant to me, legacy me, in 2010, is that these are the 3 main points. So this is just distillation of like a little longer blog post. But developers and operations can and should work together. Doesn't seem controversial, but we already know the ticket system. And then system administration is evolving to look more like software development. So this is 2010. So EC2's been out for 4 years, and you have an API to configure VMs, so you have an API to configure the systems, and you have API to do some monitoring. And when you're writing API, that looks suspiciously like software development, right? And that's 2010, and that ball's just like kept rolling, right? So the things you could do with APIs to configure and manage infrastructure today are like way beyond what we could do in 2010, and it's not going to slow down. I don't know if anyone's trying to track the CNCF project of the week or whatever, but this train is like still going strong. And last but not least, and maybe the most important, and I think it's the most important to me, and it's why I think it's interesting to come to a place like Tampa and talk to people, is that this is evolving as a global community of practice, right? That we can solve problems together, or that we can reuse common patterns of how other people solve the problems that we have today because they already solved them in a way that benefits everyone holistically and globally. And that's pretty exciting, right? So, back in the day, this was IRC and mailing lists. Now, for some reason, people like Slack. I hate Slack, but that's another topic. But at least you could talk to people. Yeah, we can talk about Slack later. So these are my friends, and I was actually doing some archaeology trying to reconstruct this. So there's this podcast that they do about DevOps, and the blog post that really captured this is John Willis wrote a blog post on the Chef blog about the first DevOps days in the US, and he highlighted culture, automation, metrics, and sharing. And then a little later, Jez Humble added lean. Okay, so like these are these like high-level things that are kind of like buckets for what DevOps means. And I think if you're really soaking in the DevOps, then you should be able to say columns. Like, you should understand kind of like what those mean. I'm going to come back to some other things you should have as a vocabulary. But I still think this is inactionable. Just saying like culture is inactionable. What does that mean? It doesn't tell us what's better. So I've been thinking about this a lot, and I've given some talks that show some of the stuff I'm going to show in a minute, but it's like these things are all connected to each other. These things like reinforce or destroy each other in ways. Right? So how do they come together? How do they multiply and divide? And what does that mean? And what am I supposed to do now, right? So it's like you see the blog post, you got the pandas vomiting rainbows, and now like, oh, well, what am I supposed to do at work when like I'm literally on fire and there's mud and blood everywhere, right? Clearly, this is the best advice. If vomiting rainbows isn't working, you are not vomiting enough rainbows. Work on it, people. All right, so I'm writing a book, hopefully, at some point to like explain what I mean, but I'm going to give you some of what I'm going to put into this book right now. So culture. Is anyone familiar with this quote? Culture eats strategy for breakfast. Literally still don't know what I'm supposed to do, but it sounds cool to say that, right? I don't know what it eats for the other meals, but whatever. Has anyone ever seen this, The Western Topology of Culture? So this is in a bunch of books. This is in the DevOps handbook, I think, and it's also in Lean Enterprise, and a bunch of people are starting to use this. I think it's also in Accelerate. But Western has nothing to do with technology, has nothing to do with DevOps. It's just a categorization of culture. And so you can say things on the left, hopefully we can agree, things on the left are worse than things on the right? So things on the left, we're labeling pathological. That's a clue that it might not be good. And then things on the right, we're going to call generative, right? So who wants to work in an organization that has low cooperation? Who wants to work where messengers are shot? Who wants to work where no one takes responsibility, right? Who works there now? Bridging is discouraged. That means basically you don't want people in their little silos to communicate to the other silos, right? You're actually actively eliminating the relationships between them. And failure leads to scapegoating, right? So it's like we got to blame someone. We basically got to kill someone because like something happened bad, and now we're going to, make sure that we never have that bad thing happen again because we're going to get rid of that bad person. We're not going to think about the system. We're not going to do anything. It's that one bad person, and now they are gone. So we're going to be better, right? And then novelty is crushed. And then on the right side, you have all the opposite things, right? Who wants to work where risks are shared? Who wants to work where failure leads to inquiry, to learning? Right? That's where I want to work. And maybe even implement some novelty from time to time. So this is just a framing that I'm going to use over and over, but to keep kind of talking about culture for a second, that the key, in my mind, for a lot of these things, and I'm actually hopefully going to make this point much stronger by the end, is aligning the interests and incentives of all the different nodes in the system, all the different personalities and personas. And then there's another big thing that I think is critical for these like transformations, which is in the enterprise, the old mindset is IT is a cost center. Right? In worst case, the CTOs are actually reporting to CFOs. Right? So you're managing everything by spreadsheets, and the only thing you have is cost control. In the Fortune 500, if you're paying attention, the tech companies that are dominating the top end of the Fortune 500 right now, they all have executives, C-levels that are technical, and they treat technology like a weapon. Right? It's a competitive advantage, and they'll dump money into building that weapon because they're going to use it to win markets, right? And you just see this played out over and over. So moving on to the next thing, we're going to talk about automation. And what I came to realize through pain and suffering is architecture matters almost as much as automation. So let's talk about that a little bit. So this is me. This is probably me like 2008. It's like, I got Puppet, I can automate anything. Just give me anything, I'll automate it. It's like, okay, well, that's a huge waste of time because, like, the thing that's there might be bad, right? And if you are trying to automate certain architectures, like, they will resist it, and they'll fight against you, and then, like, everyone's sad. So it's almost better to revisit why things exist, and I'm going to come back to why, pound why into your head over and over, but why did the thing exist, not what exists. If you understand why, you have a lot more power. If you just understand what, like you're doomed to build bad things over and over. So is this automation? Automation? Yes, no? This is not automation. No. This is a manual task with some tools. This is automation, right? Got to make the robots do it. But it's still about architecture. So what, how, and why you automate is important that you do automate. And if you just take your architecture and put it in some containers and put it on a scheduler, then it's still a bad architecture, right? And if Tetris has taught me anything, it's that errors pile up and accomplishments disappear. Has anyone ever lived this? I'm sure some of you have, or are about to. So think about your architecture. And this is a quote from a book. This is the SRE book. SRE build framework modules to implement canonical solutions for the concerned production area. As a result, development teams can focus on the business logic because the framework already takes care of correct infrastructure use. So this is the same sort of thing. The left and the right. So on the left, you have a lot of manual toil, you have catastrophic failures, brittle architectures, and there's a lot of incidents, and we focus on incidents and trying to manage incidents. In the middle, you get a little better. Maybe there's some effort. You get it focused on disaster recovery and minimizing the mean time to recover. In the highest level, what people are doing, you have platforms, they're self-healing, and you plan to operate with continuous partial failure. So it's not just things are up or down. You realize at a certain scale, the fact is that something will be down all the time, and so you architect things, chaos engineering is kind of the word of the day around this, but you architect things so that you can handle those partial failures with no service disruption, right? And that's all built in. So on that note, everyone has homework to read the SRE book, at least the principles. So I believe everyone should read Embracing Risk, Service Level Objectives, Eliminating Toil. And then bonus, if you want to read the Communication and Collaboration SRE. And you can read this book for free online. It is the Site Reliability Engineering book from Google. You can read it for free. If you just search SRE book, this will come up, and you can read it for free. So that's your homework, the principles, embracing them, embodying them. And then also there's good language, which I'm going to come back to in a minute. This is also Google's DevOps implementation, right? So like people used to be like SRE versus DevOps or whatever, like it's silly. I wrote it forward for the new SRE book, and then even the Google people are now basically saying like, SRE is the implementation of DevOps. That's Google. And if you read this book, you'll see like basically checks all these boxes. Go read this book. Remember, great DevOps steal. So like steal all the good stuff. And then moving on from the notion of the automation, or this is a paper called the Borg, or this is a sentence from the Borg paper. Has anyone ever read the Borg paper? Does anyone know what the Borg is? So, not the Star Trek one. So Google built this container scheduler that runs all of Google a long time ago, and the Borg paper talks about the evolution of Borg, and then Omega, and then talks about Kubernetes. And that's all interesting, and there's all these details about how their scheduler works and like what they do, and that's cool. But this sentence, I think, is a nugget of gold that everyone misses. And it says, almost every task run under Borg contains a built-in HTTP server that publishes information about the health of the task and thousands of performance metrics. That is gold. And I'll guarantee you, I'll bet you that you'll get more benefit from instrumenting your applications than you will from like the best container scheduler solution on planet Earth. Right? Getting the ability to query the health of your applications is a huge payoff from an operational perspective. So moving on to metrics, this is also from the SRE book. Google considers the foundation of reliability to be monitoring. Right? Everything else is built on monitoring. Because without monitoring, you have no way to tell whether the service is even working. Absent a thoughtfully designed monitoring infrastructure, you're flying blind. Maybe everyone who tries to use the website gets an error, maybe not. But if you want to be aware of problems before your users, you should probably monitor your systems. Right? And so this is like where there starts to be some tensions, because it's like you built all these systems to be automated, you have no idea what's going on. Right? Service level objectives. So this is straight from the book. What are your objectives? And I'm not going to go into it today too much, but I think service level objectives, if you actually understand what they are and embody them, actually fixes a lot of the alignment issues between developers and operations. And if you're talking about SRE and you don't have service level objectives, then you're not doing SRE like literally at all. So understand what your objectives are, and understand why your objectives are, and then figure out what you need to actually measure to see if you're meeting them. Like this is like super simple, but also like fundamental, and most people don't do it. So again, this is my little 3x3 matrix. So you have unmonitored, measured, and insightful. In one land, you have a bunch of SSH, tail minus F, like read the matrix on the screen. And then in the high-performing teams, you basically have the instrumentation built into the application so they know your health, right? And that's a big difference in operational efficiency. Sharing. So we have this global community practice I talked about. We're all sort of here today, sharing. And then we had the wall of confusion at scale between these communities or in our organization. And so what we decide to do in some places is we're going to take the dev and ops divide and the wall of confusion, and we're going to solve it with a new silo. Right? And now you have 2 walls of confusion. Good job. So, yay! Now we have a DevOps team or an SRE team. Doesn't matter. The words don't matter. Don't do that. I don't think you should do that. I mean, if you got a raise from it, cool. But it's probably not the best for your org. And I want to talk about why. So I had a conversation that was interesting. Doing a talk like this where it was a really fun conversation with this guy about why and what the different meanings of why are. And then I was reading Simon Wardley's Wardley mapping stuff, and that's also great if you want to go do some fun reading. But he divides why into 2 things. So there's the why of purpose, and there's the why of movement. And the example, probably the easiest one is if you're playing chess, the high-level why of purpose is to win the game. But then moment to moment, move to move, why do you move a piece? So there's a high-level why to win, but it's this piece creates support for this or attacks this, or there's this pressure, this position that dictates the movement. Right, so the purpose is to win, but move to move, there's a bunch of other things that would maybe determine what we do different. So this is an org chart, generic, doesn't have anything to do with IT. I mean, potentially. So it's you have some executives, and you have some middle managers, and you have people who do actual work. And then each one of these people has a different why. Right, and then why is about getting paid and taking care of your family, or you love the technology, or you love a certain problem, and everyone's got different whys. So there's all these whys that everyone has, and they're all different. And at the top, hopefully, these whys that cascade through the org connect to the big why, but in a lot of cases they don't at all. Right, and in some cases, a lot of the whys are against each other, which we already talked about. And all those whys translate into what? Everyone has a job. And there's a bunch of quotes from Deming about if everyone just does their job, the company is screwed. Right? It's all about those relationships and filling in the gaps that hold most of our companies together. If you just do your job, there's always going to be stuff in the cracks falling on the floor. Someone's got to be cognizant, mindful enough to pick those up. So these are all these communities that we have in our organizations, right? And remember, security is always at the bottom. Now, each one of these communities of practice, I'll call these communities of practice, has a different why of movement. And probably at a level a different why of purpose as well. But what you really want to do, what I feel like DevOps represents to me, is in a systems thinking perspective, build teams inside of your organization that are connected as a community of interest with a united why of purpose. Taking advantage of each of the unique skill sets and perspectives that all those communities of practice bring together into the community of interest to deliver. So moving on to my 3x3 matrix, on one side you have hidden, on the other side you have what I call ambient, which is basically in some companies everything is secret, even from each other, and then maybe in the middle it's just secret to the company, but you talk to each other, that's good. But in what I consider the highest performing kind of Silicon Valley mindset, this is a global community sharing everything, especially that's commoditized. Right, everyone should understand what circuit breakers are. Everyone should understand what all these pieces you're getting from Cloud Native Computing Foundation. That's all there. And if your company or your practice, community practice inside your company, is not taking advantage of that global community, which is more than willing to share with you, then you're at a huge disadvantage. Right? And then lean. If you study lean, anyone study lean? Deming fans, lean manufacturing fans? Lean comes from manufacturing. It doesn't always map cleanly onto everything that we do in software, but lean has all of these things already covered, right? Like lean talks about culture, automation, metrics, all these things, sharing, whatever. But one of the things I like to take from lean, and one of the things I think is valuable to add it, is this notion of Kaizen. Continuously improving. So it's not enough to just have a culture. It's not enough to have automation, but we want to be better. We want to be better continuously. And so just to keep with the three columns, I'm going to call the difference between the three is like complacent, motivated, inspired to continuously improve. And also because calms sounds way better than camps. So that's why I add my true motivation. Sorry. All right, so this is the five-pointed, Chinese medicine DevOps arrangement. This is all of them sort of like on one thing, whatever, it's my words. But it gets interesting when you think about them not in isolation, but how they connect together, right? Because pathological cultures could be fully automated. Automation can be unmonitored. Metrics could be gathered, but they're hidden from anyone who could make good decisions. And there's a lot of generative cultures. They have a great culture for being creative, but because they don't have automation, there's a lot of toil, right? And good enough can stagnate. So whatever's good enough today might not be good enough next week. So really, to me, it's about how these things evolve and relate and support each other as much as it is any one thing. Like, it's not enough to do it. And then this is the data, right? So this is the state of DevOps from 2018. Like, it's faster and it's safer. The data's there. Like, we're doing this. Who doesn't want this, right? Digital transformation. Who hears that? Business value. Who wants that? Continuously DevOps microserverless. We're going to do it. So this is like a thing people keep saying, but I actually think that's nonsense. Because software didn't all of a sudden get hungry. And software is really only important when it does something in reality, when I get something from it. It's not just software for software's sake. Few things are more expensive than building software that doesn't matter. Right? And who loves to build stuff that doesn't matter? Like, who really gets excited to go build stuff that doesn't matter? What I believe is happening is that we all carry supercomputers in our pockets, and that every aspect of human performance and experience that can be optimized will be. Like, we're seeing that happen. Information, insight, and action. Some things are optimizing faster than others, but I live in a world where I could push a button and a car comes and gets me. I push a button on my phone and someone brings me food. And that's changing a lot of things. Or I can make decisions about stocks. I can make decisions about everything. Metrics for my health. It's like everything's more there. But software is made by people. And the disruption is really these experiences. It's not just software. It's that connection to people and people being able to do things that we're creating. And it's the behaviors that's the disruption. So people, I'm going to come back to this over and over, change your behaviors. We change people's behaviors with software. So does anyone work for this company? We are not a tech company. Leadership at a company being disrupted right now. So this is a point I made in a lot of presentations, but I'm going to try to make it again today. You're building an organization that changes its behavior given new information, or you're going to lose to someone who is. You have to be able to change your behavior. And learning is the only sustainable advantage, and learning is changing behaviors. It's not enough to get new ideas if you don't change anything about what you do. Change in behavior. So to make the point stronger, I'm just going to make the text bigger. Learning is changing behaviors. So whatever you do today, whatever you see today, if you don't find ways to change, doesn't help. It's not enough to collect trivia. It must be put into practice. There's no digital transformation without people transformation. No. Okay, so this is a single loop learning model. So this is what gets a lot of people trapped. It's like you build a model and you have some metrics and you try to optimize the crap out of those metrics. But you get stuck in a curve. Like, you get stuck on a certain part of the solution and you don't revisit the big picture. So double loop learning is really about changing your assumptions that drives the metrics in the plan. If you're just like trying to optimize metrics, and people, I'm sure you've seen this, it's like people will literally destroy the company to make their goal. If they're given a metric, they're given an OKR, it's like, I'm going to get my bonus, right? It doesn't actually matter what the system is. And so it's on us understanding systems, and it's not just systems of computers, it's systems of people, to think about these assumptions we're measuring. So we revisit the assumptions. So here's some words, all the buzzwords. Continuously DevOps microservices, right? These are Y's of movement. And they're really all kind of one thing. So they all kind of come from this progressive evolution to deliver software. I mean, we just heard the CTO say, like, we want to go faster, right? We want to go faster, we want to go safer, higher scale, everything faster, safer. It's like there, we have the data, it's all one thing. I'm going to call it cloud native. Blah, blah, blah. Like, this subsumes all this. And everyone wants this. Everyone wants the DevOps, right? Everyone wants the pandas vomiting rainbows. They don't. They actually don't. Here's what they want. Here's what you really want. You want scalability. You want availability. You want reliability. You want operability, usability, observability, like probably some more ilities and entities. You want it all for free without changing anything. That's what you really want, right? That's what your bosses want. So just to make that point, we're going to make that text bigger without changing anything. And why does that happen? So this is very common metaphor people have for innovation adoption. This is the diffusion of innovation. And there's this notion of crossing the chasm from the early adopters into the majority. Right? And what I used to get very frustrated, because I've been in this like agile transformation, DevOps transformation game for a long time. I used to get very frustrated that you could give people the same advice, the same tools, and they get drastically different results. And what I came to realize is it has to do with their motivation and how capable they are of changing their behavior. But the reason, and this is actually from institutional theory, like the people that study this academically, the early adopters are actually motivated to get an advantage. They're seeking an advantage. And at some point, that advantage gets legitimized. And you have the state of DevOps reports, and it says faster and safer and all this. And then what you have in the majority, and especially in the late majority, is people are not seeking an advantage anymore. They're seeking legitimacy. Right? They want to be the cool kids, too. They want to have those words. And so what they do is just change the words. It's like they don't change any behaviors, they just change the titles. Right? DevOps, SRE, whatever. So you start adopting practices without understanding them, and your strategy is basically superstition, rituals, and hope. Because you don't understand why you're doing anything. Okay, what we have to change, can you tell us exactly what to do? No. 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 Because I don't know where you're at. Like, I don't know. Like, if I give you a training program, a physical training program, and you're not capable of doing that, right? Like, there needs to be a couch to 5K before you go run the marathon. You shouldn't try to do Olympic lifting if you can't do, like, a few push-ups, right? You have to understand what you're doing. So the motivation is key. Do you want an advantage, or do you want legitimacy? And really, as an organization, as people, we should ask ourselves that. But this is not just one curve, right? These just keep coming. Like, every week there's a new project in CNCF, right? Some of them are garbage, but whatever. These waves can, like, crash all our boats, or we can ride it, right? Ride the waves. I want to be that guy. But no one can tell you how to surf. You have to get in the water. You have to feel it. You have to get on the board. You have to fall. You have to be willing and able to fall. Right? People talk about failure, culture, blameless culture. Like, how many of us really have cultures that allow us to fail? Really fail. And the will to surf, the will to succeed, the will to get an advantage has to overcome that fear of failure. And that's organizationally what you have to do to get the success. But there's a warning. Here's a warning. Surfing is hard. Has anyone tried to surf? It sucks. It sucks. It's hard. Also, software is hard. And software is always hard, right? So people talk about DevOps and like hushed tones or reverent tones, and it's like, this is what it felt like to me. This is what it felt like. It felt like mud and blood. This is actually a picture of me managing an OpenStack cluster. 2010. So this digital transformation the hard way, that's what it really is. It's like blood and mud. So this is you got warned that software is hard. So this is a story from Texas, which is close to here. This is a true story. He's told there's an alligator, and he's like, no, F that alligator, and then he dies. So you know that. The warning. So there's an alligator. I'm warning you. So this is the 5 stages of digital transformation I expect all of you to go through. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. Right? That's really the guy. And this is in the data too, right? So the DevOps report has this J-curve of transformation that as you try things and build in this failure, you probably will fail. It probably will be harder. This is every skill. If you try to improve your basketball game, your golf game, you try to change the way you do things, there's always a little depression in your ability, in your statistics before you get the improvement. So you have to be willing to push through that. So I hear this all the time. We implement DevOps or we implement Agile. And it's like, bro, yeah. There's no such thing as implementing DevOps. It's not a thing. There's no such thing as implementing Agile either. It's like never done. It's not safe. There's nothing safe about software. Also, Scrum is terrible, but we can talk about it later. So it's never done. And it's always going to move. It's going to move up the stack. So we started this conversation in 2009. The tools that we had then are very different. So don't get fixated on the tools. Get fixated on the principles. Like what's happening with serverless, what's happening with service mesh. All these things are changing constantly, right? Don't get fixated on like, I do this thing with Puppet. Like that is a dead end. So this is my definition of DevOps: optimizing human performance and experience operating software and with humans. No one originally set out to do DevOps, continuous delivery, microservices. These were natural consequences. These were Darwinian pressures. So don't fixate on these words. Fixate on those outcomes. Don't fixate on the what. Fixate on the why. Why? So are you doing DevOps? Who cares? Who cares? Why do you care? Do you have joy? Do you have ease? Do you have love? And do you have results? Are you winning? Are getting an advantage? So the problem is people. So we're coming to the home stretch. Because I've warned you, software is hard. Humans, harder. Yeah, politics, that's hard. Because the problem here is humans are awesome and humans are also terrible. And I'm suspecting you're probably human and humans can learn. And as I said before, you haven't changed anything until you change your behavior. You haven't learned until you change your behavior. So hopefully you're going to go change your behavior. I don't have time to learn new things because I'm too busy getting things done. Does anyone work with that guy? Yeah. Least productive person in the world. It's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives. It is the one that is the most adaptable to change. There is no evidence Darwin ever said this. So saying digital transformation won't fix your pathological culture. Saying DevOps doesn't solve a lack of vision. Staying safe doesn't align incentives and interests. Software is creative. Software is complex. Software is not digging ditches. Software is not running factories. Software is closer to art than science. The principles are more important than the practices, are more important than the tools. What DevOps looks like tomorrow will be totally different tools. The mindset you have is more important than the skill set you have, is more important than the tool set you have. Adapting is more important than adopting. Why is more important than what. So you got to connect the whys. Dev and ops is just two things, but in a system, there's all these other pieces, right? Connect the whys. That's to me what gives you the most advantage, and I'm seeking an advantage, I don't know about you, is connecting the whys to all these people that you have in your organization. And you care enough to be here. So I said, why should you care? I know you already care. You came. Why did you come? Right? Go change your behavior. So this is my endorsement for this is the best methodology. The best methodology is inspired people working together. So this is a call to action. The final slide, basically. Be inspired. Revisit your assumptions. Connect the whys together. Change your behavior. Change your behavior. Change your behavior. Thank you.